"You're fired if you drop one more glass," he sneered. Naomi Carter swallowed her pride and kept moving, not knowing that her quiet act of kindness that night would change her entire destiny. A struggling waitress secretly battling poverty, grief, and lost dreams, a lonely young girl fighting her own battles with injury and isolation, and a father, one of the wealthiest men alive, silently watching it all unfold. One forgotten corner of a restaurant becomes the battleground for something bigger than either of them knew. The battle for dignity, for hope, for a future neither thought they still deserved. This isn't just a story about hardship. It's about redemption, born from a simple act of humanity, and a future stronger than any dream left behind. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much, and now, let's get back to the story. You drop one more glass, Naomi, and you're gone. The words cracked through the gentle clatter of silverware and jazz, slicing the air like a whip. Naomi Carter didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. Her hands, trembling only slightly, continued gathering the shattered remains of the water glass she'd knocked off the tray. The shards glittered like ice under the warm Edison bulbs overhead, each one a jagged echo of her exhaustion. The Crescent Lily wasn't just a restaurant, it was a performance. Polished oak floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to Charleston's waterfront breeze, and a wine list that could make your head spin before the first sip. It was a place for silk ties and soft power, for quiet deals and louder flexes. But Naomi didn't belong to that world. She moved through it like a shadow, present but overlooked, working in the seams between linen napkins and clinking glasses. Her uniform, once a crisp navy blue button-down, had faded from 100 washes and 1,000 hours. Her black non-slip shoes were worn through at the soles, duct tape barely keeping the heel from splitting. She stood slowly, the shards gathered in a dustpan tucked into her apron, and walked to the back without a word. She didn't need to see Greg Mallory's smirk to feel it burning into her back. She could hear it in his tone, smell it in his cologne-soaked ego. The man had a talent for humiliation. A skill honed from years of punching down and praising up. "Third time this month. That's what he said, right?" She mouthed the words silently as she dumped the glass. Third time. Like her life had been a parade of clumsy mistakes. Like she hadn't spent years balancing trays with the grace of a dancer. Like she wasn't working 3 doubles a week to keep the lights on and her mother's medication flowing. Naomi smoothed her apron and exhaled. No time to cry. Not now. Not ever. Really. She pulled her shoulders back, despite the ache that clawed between her shoulder blades. The burned scars on her fingers, gifts from 1,000 hot plates, tingled against the chilled tray she picked up next. Across the restaurant, someone snapped their fingers for another wine pairing. A couple chuckled, not at her, but near her, and that was enough, close enough to wound. She moved anyway, silent and swift, like a tide no one sees coming. Behind the counter, Greg barked, "Table 10 needs a refill, and Table 12 wants extra bread. Now, on it," she said, already weaving through the maze of high-backed chairs and stiff laughter. The words felt like rust in her mouth. She didn't let herself remember too much while working. It was dangerous. Memories could trip you up like loose tile. But tonight, they pressed in. The hunger behind her ribs, the way her mother's hands had trembled this morning, even after the dose. The envelope still waiting on the counter at home marked final notice. 4 years ago, Naomi Carter had been halfway through her second year at Columbia Medical School. Top 10 in her class, a rising star in pediatric neurology. Her professors had called her a natural. "You bring calm with you," Dr. Ellison had once said. "That's a talent most doctors spend decades trying to fake. But no one prepares you for a phone call that says your mother collapsed in the kitchen. No textbook teaches you how to choose between your future and your family." Naomi didn't hesitate. She withdrew from her program, sold her laptop, and took the first server job she could find. What she didn't sell, she carried. Every single day. "Hey, Naomi," a chirpy voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to see Lindsay, blonde, 21, flawless, approaching with that practiced pout and the entitlement only the deeply favored could afford. "Could you maybe cover my section for like 20 minutes? My boyfriend just showed up with Ty and..." I've got my own tables, Naomi said tightly, and I've been here since noon. Lindsay pouted deeper. Come on, remember when you took that call from your mom's doctor? I didn't rat you out. Naomi's stomach tightened. That call had lasted 7 minutes, 7 brutal minutes standing behind the freezer sobbing into her apron while Dr. Simmons told her the new treatment wasn't working. Her mother's condition was worsening. Options were narrowing. 20 minutes. No more, Naomi said. You're amazing, Lindsay chirped, already halfway to the door. Naomi didn't watch her leave. Didn't have the time. Instead, she returned to the rhythm of the shift: water, bread, laughter, pain. Each minute dragged heavier than the last. At 9:02 p.m., the schedule for next week went up. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and stepped toward the corkboard, heart thudding. 3 shifts. 3. Down from her usual 7. She stared at the paper. Her name, her hours, slashed like someone had taken a red pen to her life. She found Greg by the kitchen pass, clipboard in hand. There must be a mistake, she said. I'm only down for 3 shifts next week. No mistake, he said without glancing up. Lindsay asked for more hours. You'll adjust. She lives at home. I've got rent and my mother's medication. Not my problem, he snapped. Naomi didn't argue. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she stepped back, steadied her breath, and returned to her section. She didn't know how she'd make up the income, didn't know what bill wouldn't get paid. She just knew that she couldn't break. Not here. Not where people watched and judged and tipped based on how brightly you smiled. The night dragged on. Near the kitchen, a hostess tapped her shoulder. Hey, table 16, just a little girl for now. Dad's running late, no one wants it. Could you? Naomi glanced across the room. Table 16 sat near the back windows, half shadowed by soft lighting. A young girl, maybe 10, sat alone with her legs dangling above the floor. A blue cast covered her forearm. A wheelchair sat behind her, angled slightly out of reach. She was white, honey-blonde hair falling in soft curls, a glass of untouched water in front of her. Naomi hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yeah, I'll take it. She tucked a pad into her apron and crossed the room. Good evening, she said softly, kneeling so the girl wouldn't have to look up too far. I'm Naomi. I'll be taking care of you tonight. What's your name? The girl hesitated. Her good hand tugged at the edge of her napkin. Then, barely audible, Emily. Naomi smiled. It's really nice to meet you, Emily. Can I get you something to drink? We've got strawberry lemonade, apple juice, soda. Strawberry lemonade, Emily said, a whisper. You got it. Naomi returned minutes later with a chilled drink, bendy straw already unwrapped. She noticed how Emily flinched slightly when a group of servers burst out laughing near the kitchen. Naomi knelt again. Here you go. Extra chilled, just the way I like it. Emily nodded, her cast resting awkwardly on the edge of the table. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few minutes? No answer. Naomi leaned in, kept her voice light. Our mac and cheese? Best in Charleston. 3 cheeses. Toasted breadcrumbs. Technically not on the kids' menu, but I might know someone who can sneak it through. Emily looked up. Really looked. There was something behind her eyes, wary, heavy, almost brittle. Then the tiniest nod. Mac and cheese it is. Naomi wrote it down like she was signing a declaration. As she stood, she caught something in her periphery. A tall man entering through the front. Sharp gray coat. Movements clipped and efficient, like someone who wasn't used to being late. His eyes scanned the room, paused when they found Emily. A quiet breath of relief moved across his face, but he didn't walk over. Instead, he gestured to the hostess and was seated 2 tables away, just close enough to watch, just far enough to go unnoticed. Naomi saw it all. She'd seen thousands of guests, but this one. There was something in the way he sat, the way he didn't interrupt, and she hadn't even begun to realize just how closely he was watching. Emily struggled with her fork. Her left hand wasn't used to the job, and the cast on her right made her movements clumsy. The steaming bowl of mac and cheese sat in front of her like a challenge she hadn't trained for. Most servers would have dropped the plate and walked away. Naomi didn't. She knelt again, leveling herself to Emily's eye line, her voice low and even. Hey, she said softly. May I sit for a moment? Emily gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. Naomi pulled out the chair across from her, not because she needed rest, but because the child needed an anchor. For a moment, it was just the two of them in their own quiet corner of the world, lit by the flicker of a single candle and the glow of a restaurant that was trying too hard to impress the wrong people. Looks like that cast is making dinner a little tricky, huh? Emily nodded, her cheeks flushed. Her frustration hung in the air like fog, dense and silent. Naomi kept her voice casual, warm, not condescending. You know, when I was in med school, well, almost, I learned something really cool. When one part of your body gets hurt, your brain actually rewires things. Other parts of your body start learning new tricks to help out. Our brains are brilliant like that. Emily paused mid-fidget. You were a doctor? I was studying to be one. A pediatrician, Naomi said. That means a doctor for kids, but life had different plans. There was no bitterness in her voice, only fact. The truth she had long accepted, even if it still pulsed like a bruise beneath the surface. She reached for the fork and gently demonstrated how to grip it differently, bracing it in a way that gave Emily more control. Like this. See? Try that. With Naomi's help, Emily lifted a bite to her mouth, clumsy but successful. There you go. Naomi grinned. Your brain's already catching on. Emily chewed slowly, processing more than just the food. It's not broken, she said suddenly, lifting the cast slightly. Just fractured. Skateboard accident. My fault. Kind of. Naomi nodded. Then that means it's healing. And I bet you're great at a lot of things that don't need two hands. Emily looked down shyly. I like to draw, but now I have to do it with my left hand. That's impressive, Naomi said. Most people can't even draw with their good hand. I'm not even allowed near a pencil. Seriously, you should see the dinosaur I tried to draw once. It looked like a lopsided potato. Emily giggled, the sound delicate but real. Naomi's heart clenched. That sound, she hadn't heard it in a long time. And from the corner, the man in the gray coat leaned forward ever so slightly, his eyes fixed on his daughter. He had heard it too. Naomi stood, smoothing her apron. I've got to check on a few other tables, but I'll be back. Okay? You just focus on that mac and cheese masterpiece. Emily nodded, a little braver now, a little more like the kid she used to be. And just before Naomi turned, she caught something else, a pair of eyes watching her. Not with suspicion, not with judgment. With curiosity, with interest. The kind of gaze that could dismantle a future or build a new one. But Naomi had no time to guess at it. She moved back into the fray of the dining room, balancing two pitchers, dodging a busboy's tray, her mind still half at table 16, until the voice sliced through the air again. Carter, you're falling behind. Greg Mallory, clipboard in hand, his voice echoing over the music and murmurs. Jessica's been waiting on her drinks for 10 minutes. Get your head in the game. Naomi turned slowly. Her jaw clenched, her face unreadable. I'm managing my section, she said, firm but quiet. Then manage it faster, Greg snapped, and stop babying the kid in the corner. This isn't a rehab center, it's a restaurant. The insult hit like a slap. Several nearby customers turned their heads. Emily's eyes were wide now, her fingers curling against the table's edge. Naomi didn't blink, didn't flinch. She's not a charity case, she said, loud enough to be heard but calm enough to hold weight. Her name is Emily, and she's a guest, Greg scoffed. Just get the orders out before someone else drops the ball. He spun and marched toward the bar, leaving a silence in his wake that hummed with tension. Naomi exhaled, her heart thudded, but her face remained composed. She walked back toward her section, her spine straight, her breath steady. Emily was watching her. Is he always like that? She asked softly. Naomi cracked a small smile. Only on days that end in Y. Emily giggled again, more confident now, the cast hiding half her grin. From 2 tables away, the man in the gray coat, Daniel Foster, felt something inside him shift. He hadn't planned on being late tonight. He hadn't planned on arriving to find his daughter seated alone, or for that matter, laughing for the first time in 6 months. He also hadn't planned on staying silent. But here he was, watching, listening, calculating. A realization began to bloom, slow, inevitable. This woman, this waitress in faded shoes and burn-scarred hands, she had done something no therapist, no counselor, no educator had managed to do in nearly a year. She had made his daughter feel human again. By the time dessert menus hit the table, Emily was drawing with her left hand, awkward strokes, but joyful ones. Naomi leaned over and peered at the drawing. A lopsided cat with 2 different colored eyes. I think you're onto something, Naomi said, tapping the picture. That could be a comic strip. What's his name? Emily grinned. Crash. Naomi laughed. Crash the cat, I love it. She reached into her apron and pulled out a little pack of crayons. On the house. And for the record, I think Crash has a lot of stories left to tell. Daniel Foster felt that smile land heavier than any business deal he'd closed. He hadn't expected to feel anything tonight, least of all hope. When the check came, he stood, quietly. No theatrics, no introductions. He slipped his card into the leather folio and handed it to Naomi. She processed it without a blink. Didn't even notice the name printed on the card. Daniel Foster, CEO, Foster Hospitality Group. As she handed it back, he placed a folded bill into her palm. You made this evening easier than it should have been, he said. Thank you. Naomi blinked, caught off guard. Just doing my job. No, he said. You were doing far more than that. Before she could respond, Greg reappeared, face like thunder. Office. Now. Naomi looked from Emily to Daniel. He was watching Greg now with a new expression, one of deep, simmering interest. I'm just finishing up with my tables, Naomi said, calm but firm. I said now. Daniel turned to Emily. You good for a minute, sweetheart? Emily nodded. I'm finishing Crash. He nodded back, then met Naomi's eyes. There was something different there now. Not politeness. Not gratitude. Intent. Naomi turned and followed Greg toward the back hallway. She didn't know it yet, but each step she took away from that table was a step closer to the moment her entire life would begin to shift. Behind her, Emily drew a second cat beside Crash, a taller one wearing a navy blue apron and pearl earrings. Crash's best friend. The hallway behind the kitchen was a narrow, steaming tunnel of fryer oil, bleach, and anger. Naomi Carter followed Greg Mallory's stiff back past the dish pit, past the laminated health inspection signs, past the point of no return. Her feet dragged slightly on the tile, her shoes sticking from wear and the grease that always settled no matter how often the floor was mopped. Greg pushed open the office door with the back of his clipboard and flopped into his squeaky leather chair like a man settling into a throne. The fake ficus plant in the corner had a cobweb strung between its leaves, and the desk was cluttered with open invoices, a half-eaten protein bar, and crumpled napkins covered in half-legible notes. Close the door, he barked without looking at her. Naomi stepped in and shut it behind her. Want to explain what that was out there? He said, gesturing vaguely toward the dining room. I was helping a guest, she replied evenly. She needed assistance. The cast. Greg waved his hand dismissively, the way you'd swat away smoke. I don't care if her leg was in a sling and she rolled in on a skateboard. This is a restaurant, not a rehab center. You spent nearly half an hour at one table. Jessica had to pick up your slack. Naomi blinked. Jessica left over an hour ago. She met her boyfriend out front. Lindsay asked me to cover. Greg leaned back, a smirk twitching at the corner of his mouth. She asked, and you agreed. That's how adults make deals, Naomi. You take responsibility. He laced his fingers behind his head, staring at her with that smug, oily confidence that only comes from getting away with too much for too long. This isn't personal. It's business, he continued. I need servers who flip tables, not social workers with sob stories. Naomi didn't flinch. Not because the words didn't cut, but because she refused to let him see it. I'm making a note in your file, he added, reaching into a drawer. And while we're being honest, your schedule's been cut again. 1 lunch, 1 dinner. Naomi's throat tightened. 2 shifts? That wouldn't even cover gas, let alone rent, let alone the next set of prescriptions for her mother, whose latest round of injections cost more than Naomi made in 2 weeks. Greg, she said, her voice low but resolute. Please, I need those hours, my mother. Greg's face twisted. Your mother's not my problem. You keep dragging your drama in here like it's a coupon I'm supposed to honor. Jessica brings in tips. Customers like her. They don't like being guilt-tripped by a walking pity parade. Naomi's hands balled at her sides. I don't ask for special treatment. I work harder than anyone else here. You work slower than anyone else here. He tossed an envelope onto the desk. Tips, he said. Redistributed. You know the new pool policy. Naomi took it. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She could already feel the weight. Too light. She already knew what it meant. You'll be here Tuesday, Greg added, turning back to his screen. Don't be late. Naomi didn't speak. Didn't break. She walked out the door without another word, the envelope gripped between her fingers like it might dissolve if she held it any tighter. The restaurant was quieter now, emptying out. Only a few tables left with lingering guests nursing final sips of wine. The laughter had died down. The jazz had softened. Naomi walked past the booths without looking up, her vision tunneled, her world reduced to the drum of her heartbeat and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Outside, the air hit her like a cold cloth. It was past midnight. The streets were slick from an earlier drizzle, the kind that never really falls but lingers, makes everything smell like pavement and memory. She climbed into her old Honda Civic, 15 years old and still kicking, and opened the envelope. $43. 10 hours. Dozens of guests. At least $120 in tips before the split. Her breath left her in one long exhale. Not even enough for half a prescription. Not even close. But she didn't cry. Crying didn't fix water heaters. Crying didn't pay overdue bills or rent or co-pays. Crying didn't keep your mother alive when insurance wouldn't. So Naomi drove. Her apartment was on the second floor of a crumbling building just off the edge of Charleston's east side, close enough to smell the money, far enough to never taste it. She parked between two rusted-out sedans and tiptoed up the narrow stairwell past the neighbor's door that never quite shut and into her own unit. Inside, it was warm, quiet, home. The faint smell of lentil soup still lingered in the air. She set her shoes by the door and crept down the hall. In the bedroom, her mother, Dorothy Carter, slept beneath a knit blanket, breathing slow and even. On the nightstand sat the medication chart, filled in neatly. A thermos of water, still cold. A chair nearby. Mrs. Lopez must have stayed late again. Naomi whispered a quiet thank you to the silence. In the kitchen, she dropped the envelope beside the pile of unpaid bills. Her hands hovered for a moment, unsure what to do next. Then, without thinking, she opened her laptop. Her cursor blinked. The Columbia Medical School portal was still bookmarked. She clicked. A single red bubble blinked at the top. One new message. Subject, Pediatric Neurology Fellowship, late application. Naomi clicked. It was from Dr. Ellison. Naomi, I never unsubscribed your student credentials. I couldn't, not after the promise I saw in you. A spot has opened again. Pediatric Neurology, full tuition remission, stipend, partial research, full clinical. The deadline was yesterday, but if the application comes from you, the committee will consider it. Please call me. We need minds like yours back in medicine. Naomi blinked at the screen, stunned. 3 weeks ago. She hadn't seen the email. That had been the week of back-to-back doubles, when she didn't sleep, when Lindsay forgot to clock her out and Greg docked her hours anyway. Her fingers moved before she could stop them. She typed a response, a plea, an apology, a long shot. And then at 2:17 a.m. she hit send. The screen went dim. The silence deepened. She leaned back and stared at the ceiling. If Dr. Ellison said yes, what then? Who would care for her mother? What would pay the rent until the stipend kicked in? How long would it take for her world to collapse in a different way? The alarm on her phone buzzed 3 hours later. 6 a.m. Time for her mother's first dose. She rose, poured a glass of water, and counted the pills into a napkin. Her hands moved on instinct, like muscle memory, like tying your shoes or braiding someone's hair. She was just setting the water on the tray when a sharp knock echoed at the front door. Naomi froze. No one knocked. Not here. Not this early. She padded quietly to the peephole. A courier stood on the other side holding a thick cream-colored envelope. Naomi Carter? He asked when she opened it. She nodded. Signature required. She signed, heart suddenly thundering in her ears. Inside the envelope, a single card and a letter. The card read, Daniel Foster, CEO, Foster Hospitality Group. She unfolded the letter. The handwriting was precise. Miss Carter, last night, you showed my daughter a level of care, patience, and respect that reached her in a way no professional has managed to in over a year. You did this not knowing who she was or who I am, and that makes it extraordinary. My car will arrive at your address at 9 a.m. to bring you to my office. If you choose to accept this invitation, the driver will wait 10 minutes. Emily asks that you come. She says you're the first person who ever looked her in the eye and didn't treat her like she was broken. Respectfully, Daniel Foster. Naomi read it once. Then again, her pulse roared in her ears. She looked down the hall at her mother's door. Then back at the letter. The clock ticked past 6:15. The sky beyond the curtains was beginning to blush with the first light of day. And for the first time in a very long time, Naomi Carter felt something she had nearly forgotten: hope. At exactly 9 a.m., a black town car rolled up to the curb in front of the weather-worn apartment building on the edge of Charleston's east side. The sleekness of it, glossy chrome, tinted windows, quiet luxury, looked like a visitor from another planet, parked amid the cracked pavement and leaning fences. From the second-floor window, Naomi Carter watched its arrival with a kind of stunned stillness. She wore her only professional outfit, pressed navy blue slacks, a crisp white blouse, and a tailored blazer that still held the scent of lavender sachet from the closet. Her mother's pearl stud earrings, worn only during medical rotations years ago, sat nestled in her ears, like a relic of a forgotten identity. She had tied her curls into a soft twist, applied a light gloss, and took one last look in the mirror before kissing her mother's forehead and whispering, "I'll be back soon." Mrs. Lopez had arrived early and was already setting up the day's medication schedule, fussing over Naomi like a sister instead of a neighbor. Naomi handed her a full list of instructions, taped to the refrigerator with a magnet that read "one day at a time." She walked down the stairwell, past the flaking railing, her heels quiet against the concrete. When she opened the car door and stepped inside, the smell of leather and cedarwood washed over her. The driver offered a polite nod, said nothing, and pulled away from the curb with the silent confidence of someone trained to serve without questions. The city blurred by in quiet flashes: dockside warehouses, colonial storefronts, church steeples, and then suddenly, the towering glass facade of Foster Hospitality Group's headquarters rose before her like something out of a dream, 40 stories of power, wealth, and immaculate symmetry. As the elevator doors slid open on the top floor, Naomi stepped out into a lobby filled with golden morning light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the wide stretch of the Charleston harbor. A breeze filtered in through a cracked window, bringing with it the smell of sea salt and distant magnolia. And just beyond the waiting area, seated near a table covered in pastries and colored sketchbooks, was Emily. Her wheelchair was angled beside a low glass table, a tall glass of strawberry lemonade resting within arm's reach. When she saw Naomi, her whole face lit up. "I told Dad you'd come," Emily said proudly. "He's on a call, but he said I could start breakfast without him. You should eat too. Adults always forget." Naomi smiled, easing into the chair beside her. "Strawberry lemonade before 10 a.m.? You must have some serious connections." "I do," Emily replied with a sly grin, pushing a chocolate croissant toward her. "Also, I have a question." Naomi leaned in. "I'm listening." "If your brain can rewire after an accident, does that mean I can still be who I used to be?" Naomi was quiet for a beat. She reached out and gently touched the edge of Emily's sketchpad, where Crash the cat now had a sidekick, a girl in an apron and pearl earrings. "I think," Naomi said slowly, "you can be someone even stronger." Emily beamed. They spent the next 10 minutes lost in the world of Crash the cat, adding villains named Gravity and Doubt, giving Crash a jetpack made of glitter glue. Naomi laughed without realizing how loud it was, and the warmth of it drew the attention of the man standing just beyond the doorway. Daniel Foster. He watched them for a moment. Watched his daughter light up. Watched a woman who'd entered his restaurant as a stranger now become the anchor holding his daughter's world together. He cleared his throat softly. "I see I've been replaced." Emily rolled her eyes. "It's not a competition, Dad, but if it was, I'd still pick her." Naomi rose and smoothed her blazer, following Daniel as he gestured toward a glass-walled conference room. Her heart pounded, but her voice, when she spoke, was steady. "I imagine you have questions," Daniel said. Naomi looked him in the eye. "Only one," she replied. "Why me?" Daniel didn't sit. He moved to the window, hands resting lightly on the edge of the glass, overlooking the harbor. The morning light caught the silver at his temples. "Because last night, I saw something I haven't seen in over a year," he said. "I saw my daughter laugh. I saw her open up to someone. I saw her be herself." He turned, meeting Naomi's gaze. "And I saw someone treat her like a person. Not a diagnosis, not a problem, not an obligation, just a kid who needed a little kindness." He slid a thick folder across the table. "I hadn't planned to be at the restaurant. I was running late. I saw her at the table and stayed out of sight. What I witnessed was extraordinary. What I learned afterward? Unacceptable. Naomi opened the folder. Inside were employee logs, financial statements, her personnel file. Highlighted entries revealed the truth. Tip discrepancies, unprocessed internal complaints, evidence of favoritism and schedule manipulation. Greg's signature on multiple fraudulent reports. Greg was terminated this morning, Daniel said. An audit is underway. The staff will be protected. You should have been protected. Naomi's hands trembled slightly, but she said nothing. The weight of vindication settled over her like armor, but her instincts, honed by years of disappointment, kept her poised. This isn't a gesture, Daniel continued. This is accountability. He slid a second envelope toward her. I'd like to offer you 3 options. Naomi's brows lifted, but she didn't reach for it. Option 1, Daniel said. Become general manager of the Crescent Lily, effective immediately, triple your salary, full benefits. Naomi blinked but said nothing. Option 2, join our community health initiative. We partner with local clinics and underserved schools. Your medical background would be invaluable. The position includes housing assistance and higher pay. Still, she waited. Option 3, Daniel said, his voice quieter now. Return to Columbia Medical School. We'll cover your full tuition. Housing for both you and your mother. In-home care. Dr. Ellison is expecting your call. Naomi's breath caught. Her name was printed on the envelope in sharp black letters. She didn't touch it. Instead, she looked him square in the eye. Why are you doing this? She asked. I'm not your project. I'm not someone's pity case. I won't be used for your family's emotional insurance. Daniel nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. You're none of those things, he said. This isn't charity, Miss Carter. It's recognition of skill, of integrity, of the difference one person can make when they choose to care. Naomi's voice steadied. If I do this, she said, it's not to be anyone's personal doctor. Not for your daughter, not for you. I wouldn't want it any other way. Naomi turned her gaze toward the glass wall. Outside, Emily was now giggling with the receptionist, holding up her newest drawing. She said I helped her breathe. Naomi whispered. She wasn't wrong, Daniel replied. Naomi smiled then. Small. Certain. Then yes, she said, I think I know which path I'm taking. 1 year later, the lecture hall was a soft hum of early morning energy, laptops opening, pens clicking, slides flickering to life on the projection screen at the front. The banner above the stage read, Columbia Medical School, Pediatric Neurology Residency, Neuroplasticity in the Developing Brain. Naomi Carter sat in the front row, coat starched white and perfectly pressed, her name embroidered in deep navy thread over her left breast, N. Carter, MS candidate, pediatric neurology. She didn't slouch. She didn't hide. She didn't wonder if she belonged. She had earned every inch of this chair, fought through sleepless nights, scraped through months of doubt, and come back to a world that once felt impossible. The woman who once served bread rolls to people who didn't know her name now sat among future neurosurgeons, researchers, and changemakers. And she wasn't just keeping up. She was leading. Her lecture notes were color-coded. Her tablet was open to slides she had already read twice. But even now, she took notes with quiet precision. Because knowledge wasn't just her craft. It was her comeback. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her, vibrating softly against the polished surface. A message from Mom. Therapy went great today. Emily's drawing again. Dinner at our place? I'm making that casserole you pretend to hate. Naomi smiled. Another buzz, this time a photo. A colored drawing of a cat with a bandaged paw flying across a city skyline in a cape. Crash the cat. At the bottom in careful 11-year-old handwriting, you can heal and still be a hero. Naomi closed her eyes and pressed her fingers to her lips for a moment. Just a moment, before tucking the phone away and standing. Class hadn't even started, and already the day had delivered more meaning than most people feel in a lifetime. That evening, after rounds and after dinner, yes, even the casserole she hated, Naomi found herself standing before the glass doors of a brand new building in the heart of Charleston's medical district. The Emily Foster Pediatric Rehabilitation Center. The structure itself was a marvel of child-first design. Low windows for small eyes, murals instead of blank walls, therapy spaces that felt more like playrooms than clinics, beanbags instead of chairs, skylights instead of fluorescent tubes. It was a space built not just to heal, but to affirm. Inside the front lobby, A framed drawing hung beside the reception desk. 3 stick figures. A little girl in a wheelchair, a man in a gray coat, and a taller woman in a white jacket with curls and earrings, her arm outstretched over them both. Beneath it, written in Emily's handwriting, "She saw me when no one else did. Now we'll help other kids be seen too." Naomi stood silently before it, her hand resting gently on the glass. Behind her, the sound of laughter echoed from the therapy wing. A boy somewhere was shouting about victory. A nurse called a name. Life was happening, healing was happening, and she was part of it. Everything that had tried to break her had in fact just rerouted her. The burn scars on her hands, the stretch marks of stress across her life, the exhaustion, the unpaid bills, the pain of sacrifice, they had not erased her. They had forged her. Stronger, sharper, deeper. She turned, her coat flaring gently as she stepped into the hallway, where a young intern smiled nervously and pointed toward a waiting room of families. "Dr. Carter," the intern said. "They're ready for you." She nodded once, stepped through the door, and into the life she thought she lost. But it hadn't been lost. It had just been waiting for her, quietly, persistently, at a corner table, beside a strawberry lemonade, in the hands of a little girl named Emily. Sometimes your future doesn't come announced. Sometimes it arrives with mac and cheese, a crayon drawing, and a laugh you haven't heard in far too long. And sometimes the best things in life don't ask for your credentials. They just ask you to care. The ribbon was silk, white, wide, and fluttering in the warm breeze like a whisper of something sacred. Naomi Carter stood at the front of the gathered crowd, flanked by administrators, architects, and board members. Her name had been printed in the event program as Dr. Naomi Carter, co-director, Emily Foster Pediatric Rehabilitation Center. It didn't feel real. Not even as the giant silver scissors were pressed into her hand. Not even as cameras clicked and the crowd leaned forward. Not even as the child beside her, a girl with honey blonde hair and a blue floral dress, tightened her grip on Naomi's hand and grinned up at her like they were about to launch a spaceship instead of cut a ribbon. "You ready, Crash?" Naomi whispered. Emily Foster giggled. "Only if you are, sidekick." Laughter rippled through the onlookers, though most had no idea what the joke meant. But for the two of them, it was everything. Together, they cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in polite applause. Naomi let go of the scissors, but not Emily's hand. Behind them, the doors to the new facility swung open. Inside was something Naomi had fought for, not just for herself, not just for Emily, but for every child who had ever felt small, broken, or invisible in the face of a medical system too busy to look them in the eye. The Emily Foster Pediatric Rehabilitation Center was unlike anything Charleston had ever seen. Designed not just for treatment, but for trust. Therapy rooms were painted in pastel skylines and soft clouds. Instead of white walls and clipboards, there were sketch pads, pillows shaped like animals, and light fixtures that looked like stars. There were no exam tables, just low couches and beanbags. No ticking clocks, only music, movement, and the hum of possibility. It had taken months of planning, design approvals, zoning battles, and backroom conversations. Naomi had attended every meeting, fought for every inch of carpet that could soften a child's fall, and personally interviewed every therapist, counselor, and medical technician on staff. And Daniel Foster, true to his word, had never tried to control her. He backed her vision. He funded it. But he let her lead. "I want this place," he had said in one of their earliest conversations, "to be everything I couldn't find for my daughter." Now it stood here, real and radiant. After the ceremony, Naomi led a group of parents on a tour. Some of them had children in wheelchairs, some with braces on their legs, some with injuries so invisible even the most expensive hospitals had overlooked them. But here, Naomi saw something shift. As they stepped into the art therapy wing, where a giant mural of Crash the Cat leapt across the walls, one father whispered, "It doesn't feel like a hospital." Naomi turned. "Because it isn't," she said. "It's a home for healing." Later that afternoon, she found a quiet moment in her office, a space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a bookshelf stacked with both neurology textbooks and picture books about space pirates and talking frogs. A bouquet of wildflowers rested on her desk. No card. But she knew. She didn't need Daniel's signature to feel his presence. He'd been there, standing quietly at the back of the crowd during the ceremony, just like the night at the Crescent Lily, watching, listening, choosing respect over credit. She sat down and opened her email. 24 new messages. Congratulations. Requests for interviews. An invitation to speak at a national pediatric conference. She skimmed them all until one subject line stopped her cold. Subject, late application, follow-up. It was from Dr. Ellison. Naomi, your presentation during the opening was extraordinary. The board has voted to formally offer you a joint residency track, half clinic, half research, at Columbia, with continued funding for your mother's in-home care. You've already done more than many of our graduates do in 10 years. We're honored to have you continue. Naomi blinked at the screen. For a moment, the light outside seemed to pulse, as if the world itself were taking a breath with her. She leaned back in the chair and stared out at the courtyard below, where Emily was chasing Bubbles with another child in a wheelchair, both laughing, both forgetting the weight they carried for a moment. This wasn't the life Naomi once imagined in her early 20s, crisp white coat and Harvard rotations. It was better, because it had been built, brick by brick, scar by scar, laugh by laugh. She had forged a future not out of privilege, but out of pain, persistence, and an unexpected friendship that began with mac and cheese and a crayon drawing. And the world she was building now? It would stand for generations. She wasn't just healing bodies anymore, she was restoring hope. The boardroom was cold, not in temperature but in tone. Polished oak, leather chairs, a long mahogany table flanked by men and women whose last names opened doors. The air smelled of designer perfume, ego, and indifference. A stark contrast to the warmth Naomi Carter had cultivated inside the Emily Foster Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, just 3 floors below. But today wasn't about therapy sessions or laughter. Today was about funding, and Naomi was about to fight for the future of every kid who had ever been told they were too complicated to help. She stood at the head of the table, flanked by architectural plans, data charts, and success metrics. Her white coat hung on a hook behind her. Today, she wore a charcoal gray blazer and a steel will. One of the board members, a gray-bearded man with cufflinks that cost more than Naomi's rent, spoke first. Dr. Carter, while the results from your initial 6-month review are certainly respectable, we're seeing an unexpected budget overage. Therapy supply costs are up 27%. You've doubled your part-time staff, and you're rejecting insurance restrictions in over 40% of cases. Naomi nodded. That's correct. He raised a brow. Would you care to explain why? Yes, she said. Because healing children doesn't happen on an insurance timeline. It happens on their timeline. A few board members exchanged glances. Another one, a woman in pearls with an icy smile, chimed in. We're not here to debate ethics. We're here to discuss scalability. Your model isn't sustainable. Naomi took a slow breath. It wasn't designed to be scalable in 6 months. It was designed to be revolutionary. She tapped the screen beside her, where photos flicked through. Children drawing, laughing, walking, playing therapy games that looked like playdates. Every one of them was a face she knew by name. No child here is treated like a number. No parent is spoken down to. We have therapists, not technicians. We use art, not sedation. And we don't cut corners to please spreadsheets. The room grew quiet. Naomi's hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table, but she didn't let the silence stop her. I didn't build this center to impress executives. I built it because for too long, families were told they had to accept mediocrity as medicine. I've worked those jobs. I've cleaned those floors. I've seen mothers cry in back alleys because they couldn't afford another appointment. She stepped forward. And you know what makes this place work? Trust. Between a child and a therapist. Between a parent and a physician. And yes, between the leadership and the community. That trust, it doesn't come cheap. Silence again, then a voice from the back. I think we've heard enough. Everyone turned. Emily Foster had entered the room. She wore her blue denim jacket, her cast now long gone, and a sketch pad tucked under one arm. Behind her stood Daniel Foster, arms crossed, silent. Emily stepped up beside Naomi like she belonged there. Because she did. I'm not a doctor, she said, her voice clear, strong, and higher than any of them expected. And I don't know anything about budgets. But I know this place made me feel human again. She held up a drawing, one of Crash the cat flying through a hospital room filled with smiling children. This is what it feels like when someone treats you like you're still whole, she said. When Miss Naomi helped me eat mac and cheese with one hand, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. Her eyes scanned the room. And if you stop helping her do that for other kids, then I guess this board isn't about healing. It's about control. No one moved. Then, slowly, Daniel stepped forward. I believe the young lady has said enough. He looked at Naomi, gave the faintest nod, and placed a folder on the table. Foster Holdings will personally cover any budget gaps for the next 2 years, but this board will stay on as a community advisory group only. Dr. Carter will retain full operational control. If that's not acceptable, I'll take my funding elsewhere and build another center from the ground up. Naomi turned away so they wouldn't see the emotion burning behind her eyes. She hadn't asked him to come. She hadn't asked him to fight. But he had. Not to save her. To protect what they'd built together. And this time, the board didn't argue. Because they knew. They were no longer gatekeepers. They were guests. And Naomi Carter had just proven that revolution doesn't always begin in labs or lecture halls. Sometimes it starts in a corner booth, with a crayon, a cast, and a bowl of mac and cheese. The knock on her office door came just after 3 p.m. Naomi Carter looked up from the files on her desk, expecting a nurse, maybe a parent needing clarification on a care plan. Instead, her receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. No appointment, says it's personal." Naomi paused. Did they give a name? A beat of hesitation. Greg Mallory. Silence expanded inside the room. She hadn't heard that name in over a year, not since Daniel Foster's investigation unearthed the financial tampering, harassment reports, and falsified schedule logs at the Crescent Lily. Greg had been fired within 48 hours. The last she'd heard, he'd bounced from one failed restaurant job to another, leaving a trail of bitter Yelp reviews and burned bridges. Now he was here. Naomi's first instinct was to say no, but she didn't. "Send him in," she said quietly. A moment later, the door opened. Greg Mallory walked in, looking like a deflated version of the man who once towered over her with a clipboard and a permanent scowl. His once crisp shirts were wrinkled. His tie was loosely knotted. His hair was thinner, his skin paler. But the most startling change wasn't physical. It was in his eyes. They didn't hold arrogance anymore. They held something closer to defeat. "Naomi," he said. "Dr. Carter," she corrected gently. "Please, have a seat." He hesitated, then sat across from her, shifting awkwardly like he couldn't find a comfortable posture. "This won't take long," he said. I wanted to say something to you face to face." She said nothing, just waited. "I was a jackass," he muttered. "I was cruel, petty. Everything you said you were right." She kept her face still, unreadable. "What made you realize that now?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Rock bottom has a way of shining a light on your worst moments." He looked down at his hands. The nails were bitten, the knuckles raw. "After I got fired, nobody would touch me. The restaurant seemed small. My name was mud. I lost my apartment, my truck, everything. Eventually I picked up some freelance gigs. Dishwashing, janitorial stuff. Nothing steady." Naomi folded her hands. "I didn't come here for pity," he added quickly. "I came here because I saw your face on a billboard last week. The center, Emily's center. I pulled over, just sat there staring at it, wondering how someone I tried to break built something that big." She let the silence stretch. Finally, he said, "I needed you to know that I remember everything. Every time I cut your hours. Every time I threw Lindsay extra shifts. Every time I acted like your life didn't matter." "And what do you want now?" Naomi asked. Greg's eyes lifted, tired and ashamed. "Nothing," he said. "I'm not here to ask for a job or forgiveness. Just maybe a bit of humanity. I guess I came to say I'm sorry, and to ask, how did you do it?" Naomi leaned back. It would have been easy to gloat, to say nothing, to let him twist in the weight of his own choices. But that wasn't who she was. "You assumed I was weak because I didn't fight back the way you expected," she said. "You thought kindness was compliance. You thought struggle made me small." She leaned forward. "But here's the truth, Greg. When you've walked through fire, being underestimated becomes your superpower. You lit the match. I built the house." He sat quietly, taking it in. Then he stood. "I deserve that," he said. She nodded. He turned to go. But just as he reached the door, she added, "There's a support program we fund for jobless adults trying to re-enter the workforce. They're always looking for volunteers who understand what failure feels like. Greg paused. You think they'd take me? I think the better question, she said, is whether you're ready to be someone different. He nodded once, and then he left. Naomi sat there a long time after the door shut, staring at the space where her past had just walked in and quietly asked not for redemption, but reflection. Some ghosts don't come to haunt you. They come to see what became of the fire they once left behind, and sometimes that's more healing than anything you could prescribe. It was almost midnight. The Emily Foster Pediatric Rehabilitation Center had long since gone quiet. Therapy mats rolled, lights dimmed, crayons tucked neatly into bins labeled by color. Naomi Carter stood alone in her office, barefoot now, her heels long kicked off, her blazer draped over the back of her chair. Outside her window, the Charleston harbor reflected the moon like a secret. Inside, a single desk lamp cast soft light over the journal she'd opened in front of her. It wasn't a work file. It wasn't a treatment plan. It was a letter, not typed, not emailed, handwritten, on thick cream-colored paper, the kind she hadn't used since her early college days. At the top, in neat blue ink, she had written, "To the girl who was going to be a doctor." She paused, pen poised just above the page. Then she began to write. Dear me, you're sitting on the floor right now in a tiny apartment you barely afford, staring at a notice that says final warning. You haven't eaten, your hands are cracked from dishes, your feet ache, your uniform smells like fryer oil and shame. You're wondering how it all went so wrong. You're thinking of the white coat hanging in the back of your closet, the one you haven't touched in over a year. You can still feel the weight of your stethoscope around your neck. You can still remember the way your professor smiled when he said you had a gift. You're thinking of your mother, of her hands trembling, of the fridge nearly empty, of the choices you never got to make. You're wondering if quitting med school made you a failure. You're wondering if this is it. But I need you to hear me now. It's not. I know it doesn't feel like it, but something beautiful is coming. You're going to meet a little girl with a cast on her arm and too much weight in her eyes. You're going to serve her mac and cheese. You're going to show her how to hold a fork. You're going to treat her like a person when the whole world saw a diagnosis. And she will laugh. And her father, a man with power you don't even know exists, will watch you with disbelief. Not because you tried to impress him, but because you didn't even try. And from that single night, your whole life will turn. You'll return to med school. You'll graduate. You'll open a pediatric center with her name above the door. You'll create a space where healing happens in murals and beanbags and therapy cats named Crash. You'll build everything you thought you lost. But most importantly, you'll build yourself. You won't be the girl who dropped out. You'll be the doctor who rose back up. So I want you to eat something, drink water, take off your shoes, and remind yourself that even this, the pain, the exhaustion, the brokenness, is planting something sacred. One day you'll stand in a boardroom and speak truth to power. One day you'll tell another girl her left-handed sketch of a cat could become a book. One day you'll write this letter and smile through the tears. Hold on, please. Just hold on. Because the story you're living through, it doesn't end here. It begins. Love, Dr. Naomi Carter. Naomi set the pen down. Her hand trembled, not from exhaustion but release. She folded the letter gently and slid it into a small envelope. On the front, she wrote nothing. She just placed it inside her desk drawer, next to her old medical school ID and a faded photo of her mother smiling in a sun hat. Then she rose, walked barefoot to the window, and looked out over the sleeping city. A knock came at her door, soft, hesitant. It was Emily, in bunny slippers and a hoodie, holding a juice box and a sketch pad. I couldn't sleep, she said. Naomi smiled. Me neither. Emily padded in, sat on the couch, and opened her sketch pad. Want to see Crash's new enemy? Always. Emily flipped to a page. It was a mountain, big, cold, jagged. But at the top, Crash stood tall, cape flapping, eyes bright. I named the mountain Doubt, Emily said. But Crash climbed it anyway. Naomi's voice caught. That's perfect. Is it too much? Emily asked, suddenly self-conscious. Naomi crossed the room, knelt beside her, and whispered, No, it's exactly what it needed to be. And they sat there in the quiet, the doctor who once thought her life was over, and the child who once forgot how to laugh, crafting stories of resilience out of crayons and memory. Because sometimes healing doesn't arrive in medicine. Sometimes it comes as a letter you never send, and the strength to write it anyway. The bookstore smelled like freshly bound paper and cinnamon tea. It was tucked in a historic corner of downtown Charleston, a cozy wood-paneled shop with shelves that tilted slightly from years of love. Naomi Carter had passed this shop for years on her way to the hospital, always meaning to stop in, never quite finding the time. But tonight, the time had found her. The little bell over the door jingled as she stepped inside. The room was already filled with people, parents with kids on their hips, couples sipping lattes, a therapy dog named Buttons sniffing someone's purse. Every chair had been taken. A few kids sat crisscrossed on the floor, all staring at the little stage at the back of the store. At the center of it stood Emily Foster, 12 now, her honey blonde hair tied into a loose braid, her once broken arm now long healed. She stood with a confidence that made Naomi blink. She'd grown taller, fuller in voice, lighter in spirit. In front of her was a giant poster board displaying the bright, hand-drawn cover of a book titled Crash the Cat, The Cape of Courage, written and illustrated by Emily Foster. Foreword by Dr. Naomi Carter. Naomi smiled, heart full. The applause died down as Emily stepped up to the microphone, her sketch pad clutched tightly in her hands. When I first started drawing Crash, she said, I did it with my left hand, because my right one was broken. She paused. Her eyes found Naomi near the back. There was a time I didn't think I'd ever draw again, or talk in front of people, or laugh without being afraid. She flipped open the sketch pad, revealing the very first drawing, the lopsided cat with the crooked tail and mismatched eyes. I thought Crash was a joke, but then someone told me this wasn't just a drawing, it was a story. And stories help people feel strong when they forget how. She turned another page, and this story started at a restaurant, with a woman who made me feel like I mattered, who taught me how to hold a fork with one hand, and never once made me feel small. Naomi blinked hard, pressing her palm gently against her chest. This book, Emily said, is for every kid who ever felt broken. It's for every parent who sat in hospital waiting rooms hoping for answers. It's for anyone who needed a cape and didn't know how to sew one. The crowd clapped, and a few parents wiped their eyes. Crash isn't perfect, Emily added, voice rising. He messes up, he trips. But he never gives up, and neither should we. Another wave of applause filled the room, louder this time. Naomi found herself caught in it, pulled forward by the tide of children holding little paperback copies of Crash, some of them in wheelchairs, some with braces, some with nothing but a light in their eyes and a story they hadn't told yet. At the end of the event, as the signing lines stretched around the block, Naomi stood quietly off to the side, watching Emily laugh and doodle cats in the corner of each child's book. You okay? Daniel Foster's voice came gently beside her. She turned to him. She's incredible. She had the right teacher, he said softly. Naomi smiled, but said nothing. Daniel paused, then added, There's talk about expanding the center, taking it statewide. I want you to lead it, whatever you need, wherever you want to go. Naomi's response was steady. Let's build it, she said. He nodded once. No contracts, no signatures, just trust. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the final copies of the book were tucked under arms and in strollers, Emily approached Naomi holding something behind her back. I made you something, she said. Naomi raised a brow. Another drawing? Sort of. Emily pulled out a framed comic panel. Crash the cat stood beside a taller cat in a doctor's coat, both silhouetted against a sunrise. A speech bubble above Crash read, She didn't just help me fly, she reminded me I already had wings. Naomi's breath caught. She crouched to meet Emily's eyes. You know this is going in my office, right? Emily nodded proudly. Crash says thanks. Naomi chuckled, wiping a tear. Tell Crash I'll see him at rounds. And with that, they hugged, not tightly, but fully. Like people who had shared something sacred. Like people who had rebuilt the world between them, brick by patient brick. Because in the end, this wasn't just about recovery. It was about recognition. That broken isn't the opposite of whole. And sometimes, the stories that save us begin at the lowest table in the room, with a quiet act of kindness, a bowl of mac and cheese, a coloring page, and a girl who found her cape. To anyone watching this story, if life ever forced you to put your dreams on hold, if someone ever treated you like you were invisible or unworthy, remember this. Your story is not over. It's just rerouting to something greater. Kindness given when no one is watching, respect offered when no one expects it. These are the moments that change lives, including your own. You are not broken. You are building something stronger. And one day, like Naomi Carter, you'll look back and realize the future was never gone. It was waiting for you to find the strength you never knew you had. Stay strong, stay kind, and never ever stop believing in your own comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because the world needs more stories like yours.